Welcome back to Jerusalem. Today we are going to be doing another self-guided walking tour, this time of all of the famous Christian sites in the Old City.
First we're going to start at the Cenacle, which is the supposed place of the Last Supper, and then we're going to be finishing the day at the Via Dolorosa, which is the path that Jesus took as he was carrying the cross. Between that we're going to be hitting up several different sites such as the Garden of Gethsemane, Mount of Olives, and the Dome of the Ascension. So follow along as we go check those out. So our first stop of the day was the Cenacle. The Cenacle is important for a couple of different reasons. They believe the tomb of King David is here, and then it also is the location of the Last Supper. So what the Cenacle is, just kind of like a church that was built here in honor of those places. And it was built here because they found ruins of a Byzantine church that was built here that was honoring the place of the Last Supper. And the reason the Byzantine church was built here is because they believe this is where the ruins of the first Christian synagogue was. So that is the place where the Last Supper would have occurred, as well as the Pentecost and the start of the new Christian church. We are currently on top of the Cenacle, and from here you can look out onto the Temple Mount. And this is actually where Jews came to pray and look onto the Temple Mount when they were banned from even going to the Western Wall. This gives a great view of the city as well, and next we're going to be taking a 5-minute walk to the Church of St. Peter.
So next we're at St. Peter's Church, which is on Mount Zion and very close to the Cenacle. This is where it is believed that the house of Caiaphas was, where Jesus received his sentence to death, as well as Peter denying Jesus 3 times. There is a statue here of Peter depicting that scene of him denying Jesus, and the inside of this church that's built in this place is absolutely stunning. It's covered with colorful tiles depicting when Jesus was mocked, sentenced to death by the Sanhedrin, as well as the scene of the Last Supper, which is also believed to happen somewhere around here. It's a truly beautiful chapel. You can also go down underneath the church where there is old prisons carved like in the caves. It is believed that John and Peter might have been imprisoned here under the house of Caiaphas. So this modern church is built on top of an old Byzantine church, which is why they think that this early church might have been marking the place where Caiaphas's house was, because a lot of the Byzantine churches were built in places of importance that people knew of at that time. So again, all of this is supposedly. There's no proof that it's like for sure the spot, but it's still amazing to be on Mount Zion in this place where most likely this was the house of Caiaphas and Jesus was mocked and put on trial here and ultimately sentenced to death. This also gives you a really pretty view of Jerusalem, looking from this mountain across to other mountains. It's also really quiet. There's almost no one here. There is a gate when you get here that you have to press an intercom to get permission to come inside. It's very guarded, very safe, and really interesting place to see where Jesus would have started his journey towards the cross. Next, we are going to be heading over to the Mount of Olives. It's about a mile and a half walk, and we're going to go check out the sites over there. So behind me here is the Mount of Olives. From a distance, we couldn't tell if it was covered in rock or what was covering the whole mountain, but what it is a bunch of tombs. So in Jewish tradition, it is believed that on Judgment Day, the Messiah will descend on the Mount of Olives and then go through the Golden Gate. So they wanted to be buried here to be very close to the site of the Messiah descending on the mount. Now we're going to continue our walk to the actual Mount of Olives.
We are now here at the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Jesus and his disciples went to after the Last Supper, and this is where Jesus was praying to the Father while his disciples were out falling asleep. Now, a lot of people like to believe that these are the same trees that might have been around when Jesus was here. However, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, it is documented that they cut down all the trees to build their siege weapons, and that's been confirmed by different dating methods of these trees. These trees would not have been around when Jesus was walking. However, it is still very cool to be here in the Garden of Gethsemane. So here in this part of the garden is the Basilica of Agony. So it is a church built over where they think Jesus was praying and where his sweat became like blood. And this church was built in 1919, and it was as like a replica of the original Byzantine church that was built during the 4th century AD. We've left the Garden of Gethsemane, and now we're climbing up some stairs to make it to the rest of the way up of the Mount of Olives, because up here there is the Dome of the Ascension, which is where it's believed that Jesus ascended into heaven, and so there's a church built there. But man, out of shape in these steps are kind of killer.
Don't make our mistake. At the top of the steps is the Chapel of Ascension, also called the Dome of Ascension. We walked right past it because it's incorrect in Google, so just keep that in mind. If you just look to the right as you're coming up off the steps, you'll see right here is the chapel complex. It has a great overlook of the city up here. Also very close to here is a church where it's believed that Jesus did teachings in caves. It's called the Paternoster Church. Our mistake was that it's closed from noon to 2, so we're gonna miss that one this time, but that would also be a nice stop once you've made the hike all the way up here. So now we're gonna go check out this Chapel of Ascension, and then we are going to head back into the old city to grab some lunch.
So we are now in the Chapel of the Ascension, and the reason this church was built right here is because in the rock here on the Mount of Olives, it looked like there's a set of 2 footprints, and so they built this church around those 2 footprints. However, today one of those 2 footprints was actually removed and taken to the Temple Mount and is now in a mosque over on the Temple Mount, but you're still able to see one of the 2 footprints here today. Now, I was looking at it, and honestly, it's kind of hard to see the footprint, but I can kind of like see a slight indentation where I'm sure the footprint used to kind of be before it got worn away. So the structure that stands here today was built on top of the Byzantine ruins, but actually there were several different churches between the Byzantine church and the current day structure that were also destroyed. So there's been at least 3 different churches that were built here on this place of the Ascension. However, over the centuries, there's been 3 other churches that have popped up claiming to be the place of the Ascension. This place is the traditional place, it's the oldest place. It's where the Byzantine Empire built a church in honor of the Ascension. However, like I was saying, throughout the centuries, there's been at least 3 other churches that have popped up claiming to be the place of the Ascension. So it's one of those places where no one really knows for sure where it's at, but it's still really cool to be here right on site where Jesus may have ascended into heaven. Now we're gonna walk back down the hill and into the old city to grab a bite for lunch.
Spot of the birthplace of the Virgin Mary. They're not really sure, but it is cool to kind of go underground here in Jerusalem. There's a bunch of prayers tucked in this room that people just write on a piece of paper and tuck it in there. So this is just a quick stop right inside the Lion's Gate. So we just finished up our lunch and grabbed a nice coffee, and now to end our tour, we are going to be walking the Via Dolorosa, which is the Way of Sorrow. It is the path that is believed that Jesus took as he had to carry the cross from Pontius Pilate's palace up to Golgotha, which is the place of the skull. There are 14 different stations along the way that you can stop at.
So there are 3 different supposed places for the first station of the cross, and there's a little bit of discrepancy on which one it might have been, because there's just different areas where Pontius Pilate might have been ruling from. But the first one is, or the one that is traditionally thought of to be the start of the path, is the Antonian Fortress, which is just where a lot of rulers would have stayed during the time of Jerusalem. And now there's actually a school built over it, but that is where the start of the Via Dolorosa is today.
The second station is right across the street from the first station, which was the Praetorium, where it is believed that Jesus was sentenced to death, flogged, and put a crown of thorns thorns on his head. Then across the street is the Franciscan monastery, where station number 2 is, which is Jesus carrying the cross. This monastery was rebuilt in 1929, although it has medieval foundations. Every Friday at 3 p.m. you can meet here and walk the Via Dolorosa with Franciscan monks. So from here we're going to continue on highlighting Station 5 and Station 8. This path that Jesus took from the Praetorium leads all the way to Calvary, where Jesus was crucified on the cross and then buried, which is now the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So let's go check those out. So now behind me is the 5th station, where Jesus fell from the weight of carrying the cross, and it's where the Roman guards pulled Simon the Cyrene, who was probably from North Africa, here for the Passover. They pulled him in to carry the cross the rest of the way for Christ on the way to Calvary, because Christ was too weak at this point to continue carrying it any further. So that's what stop number 5 is, right behind me. And now we're going to continue the rest of the way down this road.
So station number 8 is a station from the Bible. It is in reference to Luke 23, where Jesus stopped and talked to the women who were following and weeping and lamenting over him.
So the last 6 out of the 14 stations are here at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. From the 9th station, where Jesus falls for the 3rd time, to the 14th station, where Jesus is laid in the tomb. It all is believed to happen here at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So we are going to go inside now and walk through the last 6 stations.
So when you go up there, you'll be able to identify the two, but this bridge here that used to kind of show us where the nose was and kind of identify more clearly is gone. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So when you get up there, so that would be what we would call like Golgotha or Calvary, right? Okay? Just remember that Jesus would not have been crucified like up on top of a hill. He would have been crucified along the busy roadway that was in front of it. If you watched The Chosen, you saw where people are crucified along the busy highways. That's how it would have been in Jesus' day.
Okay.
And so there was very busy highways that came from there. What we know about this is that Jesus was crucified at a place called the Skull, and also outside the city wall. When you're up there, turn around the other direction and you'll see the wall of the old city there. So we know that this place is outside of the city wall.
Okay.
And then when you go through here, you'll go through a garden, and there's a wine press down here dating back to the Roman era in the times of Jesus. What that tells us is that John chapter 19 says, close to the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and it would have been a working garden, so a vineyard. Because this is like the bottom of a wine press that you'll see there. And then it also says there was an empty tomb there that nobody had been laid in. And so then you'll see a tomb down there, and you can go in and see that. And of course, he's not there, he's risen.
Right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So the Garden of the Tomb is one of two places where it is believed that Jesus was buried. The other is where we just were, the Holy Sepulchre. So there are actually two different interpretations of the place of the skull. It's either the one that this one attributes it to, which is like a hill that actually looks like a skull, and then the second one is just that it was a hill where a lot of people were crucified and all those skulls were left behind, and it just kind of signified that there was a lot of people killed there, which is why it was called the place of the skull. And so that has led to two different places where people think that the cross was and where Jesus' tomb is, and that is why earlier when we visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they also claim that that is where Jesus' tomb was and where the cross was as well. Whereas in over here, they also believe that it was here just due to the different interpretations of the place of the skull. So another one of the reasons why they began to believe that this place here was the place of the tomb is because it says that he was outside of the city in a garden. So when the British general was here, he saw that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was inside of the city wall, so he thought that it should be further out and outside of the city. However, the wall that he was seeing at that time was built during the Ottoman Empire and was not actually the wall that would have been around during Jesus' time. That has led to some of the confusion onto where the tomb might actually be today.
So we are finishing up our time here at the Garden Tomb. We just walked through the tomb where it is believed that Jesus was laid. This is truly an incredible day. It took us all day and I feel like I could have spent so much more time at each one of the stops. I've heard it said that visiting Israel is like the fifth gospel because you truly see the sights with your own eyes and you can see the distance, the places, and all the names that you've read for years in the Bible really truly come to life. So it's a day that's really hard to put into words, but we hope this helped you if you're going to be planning a trip to Israel. See you in the next one.